Hello, friends, and welcome to Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly podcast designed to help mainstream Texans of faith understand the legislative process and help you engage with public policy in the great state of Texas. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Director of Public Witness. And friends, early voting is coming to a close, and the primary election date is next Tuesday, March 5th. This election and the runoffs that follow will tell us a lot about what we can expect in the 2025 Texas legislative session. We've been talking about it for a year or more. The Texas Impact team has toured the state and talked with and resourced thousands of Texans of faith, but now it's your turn to participate and to lead. We hope you're utilizing the Texas Faith Votes campaign materials at texasimpact.org. We hope you're sharing the YouTube video of Josh talking about the importance of voting in the primaries. We hope that you're reaching out to your friends, families, neighbors, and congregations and mobilizing them in the coming week. Y'all, now it's your turn to put those resources to work, and I can't wait to see and hear what you've been able to do. For today, we're going to share another round of audio from the Houston Faith Votes event last week. This is just a portion of a ton of great content from the last few weeks, so make sure to check out Texas Impact's website, social media, and YouTube channel. For today, we're going to share the elected officials panel from the Houston Faith Votes event last week. I really enjoyed chatting with two of our Texas state representatives from the Houston area for a conversation on the importance of primary elections, how Texans can best connect with their representatives, and talk about how Texans of faith specifically can be effective advocates for issues you care about. We were excited to have Representative Ann Johnson and Representative Jon Rosenthal join us for that conversation. I really enjoyed the conversation and hope you do too. I am super excited for this next panel. This is the second event we've done like this. We were in Dallas a couple weeks ago and had three representatives come speak to North Texans of faith, and excited to have two more join us today. And y'all, I am so excited to be joined this morning by Representative Ann Johnson from District 134. I will say, I looked up because I wasn't sure if she was in this district or not, and I did the Who Represents Me thing for the address of the church, and it said, we can't tell which district it is. So it's either like across the street one way or the other. So yes. And we also have with us, from up near my parents' house, Representative Jon Rosenthal from District 135, which is in Northwest Houston, the Cypress and Jersey Village area. All right, y'all. So how many of y'all have been around Texas Impact for a while? You've heard our stuff. All right, I'd like to see a bunch of hands. One of the things that we've been talking about for at least a year, if not like 10 years, you've heard Josh say it lots and lots of times during legislative session, but primary elections drive what happens in the Texas Capitol. And so early voting starts tomorrow, right? Early voting starts tomorrow. I'd love for two representatives to hopefully confirm what we've been saying to y'all for a year. But how do primary elections shape what happens in the Texas Capitol? Representative Johnson, we'll give it to you first.
Primary elections mean almost everything in the current draw of redistricting. So as you may know, every 10 years, we redraw district lines, and they are drawn almost to be a foregone conclusion in November, meaning if it's a Republican-drawn district or a Democratic-drawn district, you got to believe that that representative will be the same. There are only a handful of districts that are drawn to be within the margin of error where we would consider it a swing district. I am actually very proud to be in a swing district. And you're right, the district is right there on the street. So First Pres is in House District 134, and we are just out. But this is my home church. So I love being a member of St. Paul's and love that I get a chance to represent this area. And so we are a swing district, and that's a good thing. It means that I get to be responsive to both sides and get to advocate for the issues. And every once in a while, I get to take a really hard vote but this is a district that will honor, with good reason, why I'm advocating or doing things, and the fact that I try very desperately to work across the aisle. I am a Democrat, which means I'm in the minority, which also means if I get anything passed and signed, it has to have bipartisan support. Otherwise, it's not going to go anywhere. But there are a number of districts where I can't even engage in a conversation with that representative about an issue that we care about, because I have friends that will often say to me, you know, I personally agree with you, but if I vote with you, I'll lose my election, and somebody more extreme will come in. And so for those people, they are running only for March. And so this election cycle that's coming up right now, starting tomorrow, in most of the districts across the state, it will determine the future of issues like choice, or in this one in particular, public education right now. Public education is an issue that moderate Republicans and rural Republicans have voted with Democrats to defeat Governor Abbott's voucher scam. Governor Abbott is very actively campaigning with the benefit of a $6 million contribution from a private school interest individual out of Pennsylvania to try to unseat those that have voted with Democrats on public education. And so I'm actually holding my breath for the next 2 weeks and to see how Republican voters respond and what they will do. And I guarantee you the next 2 weeks will determine the outcome on public education probably.
Hi, y'all. So you don't know me very well yet because my area isn't really close to here. I live off of 290 1960. So I'm just gonna introduce myself first. I'm an oil field engineer who left industry in 2018 to run for office, and I defeated a 12-term incumbent who used to live in Jersey Village. So thanks.
Congratulations.
I'm one of the ones who flipped seats, and there were two of us in Harris County, and of those two, I'm still here. So after the redistricting, I no longer represent Jersey Village. They have more conservative representation now, which has its upside and its downside, but just like Representative Johnson was saying, that serves to solidify and really polarize these districts. So now the general election in most of the districts, just like Ann was saying, is a foregone conclusion. The only chance that you have to express your interest in policy, the only choice in most of these elections is going to be during the primary. And so absolutely critical. I'm with you about holding my breath. Some of those moderate Republicans who voted with us against the vouchers last time have retired and won't be back in the next session no matter what happens. And so those races in particular are going to be crucial. And so it sets up an interesting dynamic that I won't actually be part of, right? Because I got into this for public education. My father was a university professor. His parents were small town teachers in a remote rural area of North Dakota. So one of the primary things I got into politics about was public education. And so it's going to be a critical time for us in Texas, this election cycle, particularly the primary.
Thank you both. Primary elections are a little bit harder because there are a lot of voters who go in and check the box for their political party in November, but primary elections require some work. And your vote counts a lot more because, first of all, it's where 95% of the races are decided, and second of all, they're low turnout elections. So we have a lot of people in the room. We have a lot of faith leaders in here. We have a lot more who will be listening to this later. What advice do you have for people about how they can be effective in voting during the primaries and encouraging their friends to do the same?
I want you to start.
Okay, I'll start. So on this one, I'm a pedantic fact checker and researcher, and so I would say do your homework first. Be able to speak intelligently about these races. And there are dozens of them that we don't think about every day. The judicial races here in Harris County, that's going to be a whole thing in the primaries. But so the House districts, like for us, you only get to have an effect in one of those, and probably most of you in this area, you're going to have, one of the reps who's already in. The judicial races are going to be really important. And so to be able to speak intelligently about those, know who's who and really what's what. And so that to me is the basis for being able to talk to your family, your friends, your neighbors about the importance of the election, encourage them to vote for or against who you think is right. And then exactly what you were saying, primaries tend to be lower turnout elections, which means that your vote counts more. It also means that the folks turning out are more polarized. And so your opinion is even more important in the primary. And please express that to everybody that you know and love, because it's super important to get these folks to turn out. And if we don't, we could end up with mistakes that we have to live with for years down the road.
I wanted Representative Rosenthal to start that conversation because y'all may not know that it was in 2016 that he was active in the district's shoe leather trying to get other people elected and was organizing people to engage and participate, just like y'all are doing here. And then somebody said, hey, John, why don't you run? And so John ran in 2018 and ran a hard, robust campaign and flipped a seat that nobody thought could be done. And so he has been in areas like this and now in Austin. And so he knows what he's talking about on that engagement. On the primary side and in finding information, look for credible outlets that are doing the vetting. And so I love the League of Women Voters, and they have information. However, they ask me for my little blurb, and I give them my blurb, and my opponent gives them their blurb. And I don't know that they fact check the blurb. They just say, give me the blurb. And so I'm pretty minded about what I put on. But when every town asks me if I'm a gun sense candidate, I will send in my information for them, and they will look at my voting record and my active record, and then they will either say, yes, you are for common sense gun safety reform, or you are not. So those are other things that you can do, is check nonpartisan organizations that will vet and determine whether or not somebody is with regard to an issue that you like. So for example, the National Rifle Association. If that's the way you lean on your interest, you may look at them and see how they're rating people. Are they A-rated with the NRA? Are they F-rated with the NRA? You may want to know that. I would probably be F-rated with the NRA. I just don't seek the endorsement. The local Houston caucus. The caucus is the LGBTQ organization that is a nonprofit that will vet anybody that is seeking the endorsement, Democrat or Republican, and they will validate and verify, is this really somebody who is open to the LGBTQ community and going to protect them? So when you see that the caucus has made an endorsement, they have vetted those individuals thoroughly. I also think right now, local newspapers are doing an incredible job. For example, in East Texas, with somebody like Representative Clardy, who is a Republican, who Governor Abbott is vilifying in the media. Same thing is happening to Chairman Gary Van Dever, where there is just an onslaught of misinformation and disinformation, and it is local newspapers who are validating and verifying and saying, look, that fact that Governor Abbott is saying is not true, and here's the information. Same thing, I'm seeing the Houston Chronicle that is very thoroughly looking at candidates right now in the primary and giving you relatively both sides, or saying, hey, here's where we are. And so I would say look for those sources of information, whether you're looking in the Republican primary or the Democratic primary, both of which are very important around Harris County, whichever one you vote in, to make sure you're making the right selection.
I'd like to add to that, because Representative Johnson, absolutely right. The LGBT caucus has a very rigorous screening process. So does Gulf Coast AFL-CIO. So some of these organizations, they just have you fill out a questionnaire online, endorse you based on those. Some of them want to interview you. And then some of them have their membership vote. AFL-CIO and the local caucus do all three of those things. So there's 10 to 15 pages of questionnaire where it's a whole research and learning exercise just to fill it out. And then you go to a panel interview, and then they put it up to a vote of the body, and there's a whole thing about that. So those are organizations that I would look to, especially for people with progressive values. And I can promise you that I have an F from the NRA.
Yeah. And then, unfortunately, there are things like slate cards. And there are some that suggest that if you pay $25,000 to a certain person, you'll get put on their slate. And so watch out for those as well. Sometimes there are groups that will send out mailers, and those are effectively pay to play. And so you need to be mindful of if you get a mailer or you get something that says this is our person. I have heard horror stories from some folks about how that comes about. And so, again, look for credible sources of information. I would recommend.
Hey, speaking of, and this was not on the script, and maybe I'll get myself in trouble, I don't know. But I live in a district where there was a Republican who voted against vouchers. And so now the mail pieces are coming out that say these people who voted against vouchers did not fund your public schools. They oppose teachers, they oppose public schools. Can y'all say a word about that piece of it?
So totally not true. So what they did was they kind of set up a bait and switch where there is $5 billion of appropriated funds that have not yet been allocated to public schools, and those were being held hostage, if you will, with no actual guarantee that those would have been spent in the schools had we voted for the governor's voucher scheme. The fallacy in all of this is that we're sitting on top of $20 billion of surplus right now in hard cash, with an extra, I think it's $19 billion projected surplus by the end of the cycle. So we've got in the neighborhood of $40 billion that could be spent on all sorts of things, but we are both signed onto a bill that allocates half of that to public education. And the governor just didn't add it to his, he just didn't add it to the call for the special session. So we weren't even allowed to really take up and consider this thing. But this would have been $19 billion in spending for public education, would have increased the basic allotment over $2,000, and put in more money for safety, for counselors, for nurses, for the things that we really need in our schools. And right now what's going on, they can say what they want, but if the governor wants to improve public education, and at this point, just keep your schools open, we're going to have to increase the funding to our public schools, because we have got schools in rural districts. We got campuses closing in our area, in my area in Northwest, because they just don't have the money to keep all those services going.
In addition to what Representative Rosenthal is speaking about, which is the fully fund public education bill that was offered by Democrats in the special. And again, not to repeat something y'all already know, but during a regular session, we can file a bill and it can get movement if the majority of the Senate and the House agree with it, and then the governor can decide to sign it. Once we get into special session, we can only talk about what the governor wants us to. And even though we can try to propose legislation and get a majority vote, if the governor doesn't want it in special session, it's not going to happen. So not only do we have a piece of legislation out there right now with the funding for it, but repeatedly the House, on a bipartisan basis, passed budget improvements for public education that would die in the Senate. This voucher game didn't just start in the special. It actually started in the regular session when you had this competition between effectively what was the Senate and the House and the governor. And so when they say that we have not voted to fund or give teachers a pay raise, not only is that bogus in and of itself after numerous votes over the past year, it is absolutely intellectually dishonest, and that's what those local newspapers are calling the governor out on, for just blatantly lying to voters.
to get us back to some nuts and bolts, which we're going to be talking about in the next section, we're going to be talking about tools that congregations can use to encourage their congregations to be civically active. What advice do you have to congregations who, when we're doing things right, are kind of at the center of community life and community needs? What do y'all wish congregations would do to encourage congregations to participate in civic life?
I had a chance to get here a little early and listen to the last panel. And I absolutely loved listening to the last group and talking about the fact that when we are in our congregations, we come here for moral leadership. We come here for community. We come here to be have a compassionate community in a time of need. And then I love the fact that there are also times that we need to push our boundaries to see things a little bit differently. But we are a community that collectively can come together. I think it was a great discussion about the issues that we care about and ensuring that we recognize the compassion that can come from whatever our faith is. And I know that there are differing faiths that are here. I will tell you, it feels one-sided in the legislature. There are individuals that do not align with my interests that are quick to talk about their faith, and they are quick to talk about Christianity. Yet this last session, when we had anti-LGBTQ legislation, and specifically around medical care for trans youth, I was fortunate to have Reverend McDonald and the Taylor family come up to try to speak on that issue. And they got to experience firsthand what it is like to be on what is going to be a losing side. You have to get there early in the morning to sign up to register to testify. And then there will be a whole lot of other legislation that will get called beforehand, and they'll keep you there, whether it's 12 or 16 or 24 hours. And those are folks that come up with families and have a hard time, and they often want to push you out. And so I think the level of engagement that you have to offer, from whether it is here reaching out to other people about their vote, about how the moral issues that we care about absolutely translate into policy that's being passed out of Austin or going to Austin. And it was funny because I've had it happen to me now twice, where in two circumstances that my Christian colleagues that are actually passing things that are harmful for youth that I care about, when I asked somebody of Christian faith to speak out, one of which I knew probably what they would say, and another, I had no idea what she would say. I was told both times how that was inappropriate and improper, that I had somehow gone out of bounds as a state rep to ask somebody of Christian faith what they thought that ended up being counter to their position. And so Reverend Thompson, in that building, probably 15 or 20 years ago, was giving a sermon. I remember him saying, the civil are not committed, and the committed are not civil. And that has stuck with me, that unfortunately, I'm up against a group of folks who are not civil. And I don't want you to become like that, but I'm asking you to try to match their engagement and the level of which they participate and insist on getting their position voted through in Austin. We are absent that many times on our side in our faith. I know it's not just Christianity, in our faith of community, of vulnerability and caring for one another.
And so let me follow up on that. You want Texans of Faith engaged doing that work. What's that look like when they're doing it well?
One, being informed, completely being informed and engage other people. I mean, I force myself to look at social media because I live in this, but if I wasn't engaged in this on a political level, I'd probably turn it off too because it's outrageous. But we do have to stay engaged. And when people say, hey, I don't want to think about politics, I don't want to talk about politics, I completely understand why people don't, because right now it's awful. But it's going to stay awful, and it'll get worse the more people disconnect. And so getting people to engage, thoughtful information, and doing it. And then getting to a point where you can come to Austin. I'll tell you, one of the things that Rep. Rosenthal and I have to deal with is there are people on the other side with tons of money who will pay for buses, will put people on those buses, will bring them to the chamber, and then have T-shirts made out for them to sit with in the gallery, and they look like this imposing presence. They're also the same people that will pay you $50 a tweet. And so they have money that can make the voice seem louder than it is, but that can grow. And so we may not have money, but we have heart. And I'm asking you to engage that all year round, and either engaging voters or when we're in Austin, show up. When the Uvalde families showed up and they combined their efforts with Moms Demand Action, and they stood in the hallway and they kept screaming to a point that they shut the doors and you could still hear it, that is when the vote on Raise the Age went back to committee for a vote, because of that presence. And so in the same way that we think about in congregations, that it is our presence, it is our time, it is our contributions financially, in every way that we commit to our community of faith to keep that faith going, you have to transition this to the political element, because we truly pass the laws in Austin that can affect everything you care about: education, health, civil rights, democracy. It all happens in Austin. And so I'm asking you to put those same efforts on a daily basis to our community.
Amen to that. So I'm going to frame this starting from my own position on faith. And depending on who I talk to, I either identify as agnostic or multi-religious. I grew up in a multi-religious household. My father was Jewish and my mother was a non-denominational Christian. And I claim either membership or honorary membership in multiple houses of faith now. And so I'm perfectly comfortable in a synagogue, in a mosque, in a Christian church, worshiping with them, and in some cases to the extent where I can understand what's being said. But we share values. And so these congregations of faith that I belong to share a set of core values. They all identify in very similar ways. And so what gets us to the point where we have a gallery full of people supporting a cause is having you share your values and share your faith with the people that you congregate with, and again, with your families, your friends, your neighbors, understanding the importance of these issues and just getting people on board. If we want our freedoms preserved, if we want to do radical things like feed the children, feed the hungry, cure the sick, show kindness to the visitors of our land, those things don't happen by themselves. They have to have something. They have to have good people like you pushing for it, and so it works out best if you have these conversations, but then also move the conversation forward. Every person that you talk to can talk to somebody else. And the end result, the goal is to engage the legislators, either call the offices, send the emails. We notice when there's a huge influx of emails on a topic. We keep track of those things. And then, of course, the ultimate engagement is to show up at the Capitol, testify in committee, be in the gallery when the bills are being heard. But they do make it difficult. And to me, that makes it even more powerful when you can show up and wait all day just for your 2 minutes to speak in front of a committee. It's the way the system is designed to discourage and make it difficult for you. But in that same design, it also makes the impact that you have potentially greater, because these folks know you had to travel across the state and wait all day just to get your chance to say your piece to them. And it's crucially important.
I love that last set of comments, because we talk to our members often about the importance of showing up, right? And we've talked about elections today. We've talked about going to the Capitol. We've talked about testifying. But one of the things we talk with our legislative engagement group members with and rapid response members about is building relationships with legislators in the district before a session. So what's the best way to do that? What advice do you have for people who want to build relationships with people like you here locally?
Well, for me, the way it works is I'm already actively working on that. So with faith communities, I want to circulate amongst those communities, and I want to spend time. And the truth is, it's not just political. Every time I sit in a church or a synagogue or a mosque, I always hear something that I needed to hear that day, right? So invite them, engage your local elected officials, the people that represent you, to come and share the word with you, because you don't have to be religious to benefit from it. And so share the word, share the community, and share your values.
Yeah, absolutely invite us. Invite us where you want us to go. I see many friends in here that we started our relationship with each other on Zoom when COVID was started, and now we get to see each other in 3D. But call us, invite us, ask us to show up. I'm always happy to show up. I love what I call field trips. If you can invite me into a community where I can see what you do on a daily basis, whether it's going out to deliver food with Interfaith Ministries or anybody else, I love it when you invite me to participate and be in your world and see it. And then it helps me better understand things so that when I am on the floor and something comes up or an amendment comes up, because we have to be on the fly. Everything happens very rapidly. But it's those experiences of understanding differing communities and differing interests that when I see something that could impact one way or the other, I'm better able to get up and kind of defend or fight or advocate for something that we care about. And y'all are educating us. We are part-time legislators. We go every other year for 5 months, and in that time, we have a flood of bills that we have to deal with. And so when people, I'll tell you, most of the time y'all show up too late. I don't mean that in a bad way. But you'll show up in January and say, I have a bill idea. No offense, but January for bill idea is way too late. Now is the time to actually tell us your bill ideas, because we have to go to legislative council, get them drafted. And as incumbents, John is no opposition, so he will be there in January 25. I hope to, again, be there in January 25. But as incumbents, we'll actually get to file bills in December and start moving it. If you have a low bill number, you have a better rate of potentially get it signed. If you have a bill number that's 3,500, it's very rare that you're going to get that across the finish line, because time does matter. And so get with us early. Emma, will you stand up? Emma's with our office. I don't know if John has his folks here. But the other thing is, our office staff run a lot, and they do a lot. So also getting to know the office staff is a good thing. Engaging them, asking them to come do something, because when we're on the floor, oftentimes they are handling things back in the office and or in the district. And so any of a level of engagement that you can get with that group early and often, because by the time we get to session, most of the things are already baked in, especially when it comes to the budget.
I think that's helpful, y'all. We say it often, but you just heard them say it. Those relationships are important, and they love to hear from you. I really appreciate you both, and recognizing that we are what is standing between all of these lovely people and the food. I will give y'all just a quick second here to close out. Any closing thoughts before we dismiss this panel today?
I just want to say thanks for inviting me. I'm honored to be here, and it's been a pleasure engaging with you all. Engage, get everybody you know to vote. It's your voice. Your vote is your voice.
Same. Thank you for your presence here, and thank you for continuing to support us.
Thank you both. I really appreciate you both taking the time today and the work that you did say it's a part-time legislature. It didn't feel part-time last year. So I really appreciate y'all being willing to serve your community in the state of Texas. So thank y'all. I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with the Houston Elected Officials panel. Like last week when we featured the Faith Leaders panel, I don't know what else to say to close out this episode other than I hope you're feeling inspired and equipped. The panel and all of the speakers we've hosted so far this year have challenged the faith community to actively engage. And I know we're up for it. If you have questions or need more information or resources, please reach out. You can catch me at scott@texasimpact.org. We also have a ton of resources on the website at texasimpact.org, While you're there, I hope you'll also consider supporting this podcast by subscribing and sharing it, and by joining Texas Impact as a member. I think that's enough for today. So with that, I think it's time to close out this episode. So remember, the world needs Texans of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.
Weekly Witness is hosted by Scott Atnet, engineered and produced by David Fasalo. Our executive producer is B. Moorhead. The opinions expressed on Weekly Witness are those of Texas Impact and our guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views of our sponsors. Weekly Witness is a product of Texas Impact, people of faith working for justice. Visit us online at texasimpact.org.